Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber, and your host for today's podcast. Did you know that Michigan is home to one of the country's most diverse agricultural states? And our food and agriculture industry is a huge economic driver too? Well, today we're going to take a little deeper dive into that with a couple industry experts who are help us understand how our agriculture industry helps feed and protect Michigan and the world. A warm welcome today to Carl Bednarski. He's the president of the Michigan Farm Bureau, and Chuck Lippstreu. He's the president of the Michigan Agri-Business Association. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me.
Great to be with you.
Well, thanks for the invite, Jim.
Well, I think, Michigan's known for many things. We build a lot, we grow a lot, we make a lot of things, but I think all too often, maybe the agriculture industry flies a little bit under the radar. It's a major economic driver for our state and communities all across the state. And so I kind of want to start there with a little foundation level setting conversation. I'd appreciate both of your perspectives on what's your overview of the industry currently and a little bit more about your organizations. So Chuck, why don't we start with you?
Sure, absolutely. So just a little bit about Michigan Agri-Business Association to kick us off. So we're a nonprofit trade association based right here in Lansing. We've got around 300 members spanning Michigan, the entire region. And the way to think about our members is these are businesses of all sizes that support Michigan farmers and help ensure the agricultural value chain functions. So they're working with Michigan farmers, Farm Bureau members every day across our state to make sure that those farmers have access to the things they need to be successful. And then once they produce a crop, that it's able to make its way around the state, around the country, around the world. Talk about that a little bit more today. But the main segments of the membership are going to be grain businesses, so the grain elevators you drive by out in rural Michigan, ag retailers. This is an under-the-radar segment of the industry. These are businesses out there dotted around the countryside that sell farmers seed and fertilizer and chemistry and technology they need to be successful. We represent all the businesses that manufacture crop inputs like seed and chemistry that farmers rely on. And then a whole lot of other businesses that play some valuable role in agriculture, whether they're a trucking company or a railroad or a CPA firm or a law firm. It's a Big Ten organization because farmers, like any other business segment, need support from all sorts of different folks to be successful out there. So have a great working relationship with Michigan's farm groups and especially the Michigan Farm Bureau. And I'll let Carl talk about the Farm Bureau a little bit, but I would just kick us off by saying the state of the industry is not without challenges, but it's strong. Michigan agriculture remains the second largest driver of our economy, employs about a quarter of people when you look at the entire farm to fork value chain, and we're proud of that.
Yep. Great. Carl, what are your thoughts and what's going on at Michigan Farm Bureau?
Well, Jim, Chuck spoke very eloquently about the farm organizations that we have here representing the farmers and agribusiness of the state. We work hand in hand in making sure agriculture is at the forefront. When we take a look at agriculture, though, it's such an exciting field to be in. I mean, we look at the diversity, second most diverse state of commodities grown in the country outside of California. But recently, we have put a little tag on that, where we have the water to sustain those crops.
Yes,
it makes a big difference there. But so with that, though, the future for agriculture we think is very good in this state, and the size of agriculture, as Chuck had mentioned, is bigger than you think when we take a look at the impact to our economy here in this state. I mean, we employ a lot of people in this state, and people don't always see that because a lot of those are in those rural areas. When you take a look at it, we have approximately 88,000 workers directly related to farm employment. But then when you put the multiplier in there, that equates to over 800,000 jobs in Michigan that are related to agriculture. Yes, we have issues just like everybody else, but the one thing unique about agriculture is we can't pick up our farms and move them to another state. We're here. We're committed to Michigan. We're proud to be here, and we love doing all the crops that we do. We have, like I said, a very diverse agricultural sector. And then the Farm Bureau, that's our job. Our job is to look out for those agriculture producers, see what's coming down the pipe for those individuals and represented them in a number of issues. And I just want to clarify one thing, though, because a lot of people talk about Farm Bureau and you talk about Farm Bureau Insurance. Actually, Farm Bureau Insurance is a subsidiary of Michigan Farm Bureau. The Michigan Farm Bureau was created first 104 years ago, and they created the Farm Bureau Insurance Company because there wasn't anybody supplying insurance for farmers of the state back then.
So like most situations, farmers become entrepreneurial. They adapt to their situation, and somebody needed to have insurance, so Farm Bureau created it. I think that's a lot of times the way some of the best outgrowth happens. It's when you're really just servicing the need that a particular group has at that point.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Jim, because one of our priorities back then and 100 years ago was infrastructure, roads.
Oh, gosh.
Guess what?
And here we are.
Yeah, exactly. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You both raised a good point, too, about talent and workforce, and I don't think it matters what industry we're looking at in Michigan. That's certainly a strain on everybody. Can you get the workers you need, and can you get the training you need for them to make sure they can do their jobs? What are the workforce challenges you have now? And do we have enough workers in Michigan, enough young people coming up who still want to be in agricultural related industries? Carl?
Jim, that's a very good question. It's a challenge with agriculture when we take a look at the lack of employment, the lack of people that want to work in those areas, especially in our specialty crops. The Northwest, look at our fruit and vegetable industries, where we're actually losing farmers because they cannot get the labor to harvest their crops. But the one thing, though, Jim, that we all need to think about here is when we talk about immigration and when we talk about like the H-2A program, where we have workers coming into the state under a program. Those are two separate things that we need to separate. The H-2A program is people that want to come in. We know who they are. They sign a contract. They're here for a certain amount of time. The person that is employing them is providing housing and transportation, and there's a date where they have to go back. And guess what? They all go back. Yeah. And so you talk about immigration, is a whole different world out there. So we're trying our darndest on the state level and national level to separate those and see if we can have maybe a more workable H-2A program where we can get more people come into the state and help those producers out, because the domestic worker is not there. It's not there at all. Yeah,
well, I think, so many things have changed in America. I know, my first job was, I grew up in an agricultural community, was picking sweet corn. And that was one of the hardest jobs I ever had. There's a lot of kids now that don't want to get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning to get to the farm and walk in there and go through the work you have. And I think you're exactly right. There's a difference between immigration policy and the visas for people who are saying, hey, we want to come fill a need and make sure that you have the talent to harvest the crops that we need to find our way into the supply chain or to our tables across the state. As we look at it, is there something we should be doing different in the education system? Is there a way, are we supporting the kids who want to go into the agriculture industry and making sure that they have a path forward? I think we look at a lot of different industries, and there's always kind of a specialized path that sometimes you can take in middle schools and high schools and secondary education to make sure that we're actually training the worker for what the employer needs. Are there more things that we should be doing, or do you think we're in a good spot with that?
Well, I'll jump in and just say,
we're both on this one.
Yeah, we can always be doing more. First of all, the good news, the sort of promising news is when you look at the jobs that are out there in agriculture, whether they're on the farm or somewhere else in the supply chain, these are advanced, interesting, technology forward types of jobs, and or they are jobs where you can make a great living. In some places, we've got some great examples here in Michigan of local school districts that are stepping up to try to meet that need. Just was actually learning in the last few days about some districts, especially up through the thumb, where if you are a high school student in a sort of vocational program, you could potentially graduate with a CDL at a time when we're facing 100,000 truck driver shortage in America. We need that in the agriculture industry. But the other, I think, good piece of this is that, the ag groups in our state understand the need to, meet people where they're at in school. I know a number of the farm organizations are out there and being very proactive about getting into school school settings at all levels to introduce kids to some of the opportunities that are out there in the industry.
Yeah, I know when I was growing up, and a lot of my friends who were farm, a lot of the education was either a family mentor because you worked on a family farm, or 4-H, or some of those organizations like that really kind of help push things along. But schools back then were very active in making sure that the farm community was supported. Carl, how do you see the educational needs?
Well, we're along those same lines as Chuck. I mean, when we take a look back, when we went to our rural schools, you were with fellow farm kids. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't a farm kid, you went to go help that farmer out. That you were I guess taught a different level maybe. But the thing is, though, like Chuck says, there's so much technology now in agriculture. It's not the backbreaking work that we keep seeing. It's not the man standing there with a pitchfork. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of technical information going on there, and we need those individuals. I give MSU credit for the career path instead of going to a 4-year program, taking a look at a 2-year, but then also with that associate's degree or creating the Ag Tech program where you have community colleges closer to home where they can go and take those classes. I think that's a great opportunity for those individuals that maybe don't want a bachelor's degree but just want to go into the workforce and go to work where they can get that opportunity. We have to find creative ways to entice people to look at these jobs, and because they are some very interesting, very well-paying positions out there.
Yeah, especially with like you both have mentioned, the advent of technology and how that's coming in to, positively impact how agriculture works in the state. There's a lot of jobs out there and a lot of kids who I think are probably going to be drawn to that and looking for an avenue. You both have mentioned, the diversity of crops that we grow here in Michigan and produce. Can you give us, the listener, a little bit of an idea of how much diversity is out there? And then where do these crops end up? Do they stay here in Michigan? Are they regional? Do they get all corners of the country?
Hey, Chuck, let me start out.
Go ahead.
You're going to tell us how they get processed. But I just got a little list here, though, that I created thinking about this that it might get brought up today. But our state, like you say, we're the second most diverse state in the country. But we take a look at what are we number one in? Dry beans, cranberry beans, blueberries, tart cherries, pickling cucumbers, squash, and some that surprise a lot of people, begonias, Easter lilies, geraniums, impatiens. The list goes on. And then you take a look at some of our processors here. We have Michigan Sugar, large sugar producer in the state. Egg supply. McDonald's, if you eat an egg out of McDonald's east of the Mississippi, it's coming from a farm in Michigan. Mm-hmm. You go up north in the Northwest, Matern, the Go-Go Squeeze. If you have any kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they run 1 million pouches a day through that facility in the Northwest. Clemens Food Group, the pork down in Coldwater. You got Glambia and St. John's with the cheese. And also, Fairlife. Everyone knows Fairlife over in Coopersville with the specialty milks and that. Just this is what makes people excited about agriculture in Michigan. We have so much to talk about. And then I'm just waiting to hear what Chuck's going to have to say on where all this stuff goes and how it gets processed.
Mm-hmm. Well, Carl nailed it. And let's start here at home. One thing I would add to the impressive list of processors and businesses in the ag supply chain, Carl just laid it out really well. These businesses are themselves investing back in our state in really big ways and in ways that benefit people in small towns and big cities alike. And, just thinking of a couple examples, Carl mentioned Michigan Sugar Company, longstanding, Michigan-based cooperative, but they have a major investment ongoing right now in Bay City. Their molasses desugarization facility. They've invested $100 million plus in that facility. That's going to bring economic benefits back to the community, but also farmers throughout mid-Michigan and the Thumb, the sugar beet growing region. Something very unique to Michigan. We think about over on the west side of Michigan, King Milling Company in Lowell, which has laid out more than $40 million in investment to put in a new flour mill there that, again, supports Michigan farmers. It supports Michigan's position in the supply chain. And it's good news for West Michigan, and our entire state. Those are just a couple good examples. And by the way, both Michigan Chamber members, I would add.
Absolutely.
And longstanding Michigan Chamber members. And so, look, here at home, these companies are all investing in the state of Michigan, which is great news. In terms of where these products are going, they are going everywhere. I think one great example, one of many, is Michigan dry beans. And Carl, up in Carl's part of the state is, we would argue, the number one spot to be growing various classes of dry beans in the world. And people around the world recognize that, and they're voting with their wallets. The dry beans growing up in the Thumb and Saginaw Valley are exported to 6 continents. They are in high demand, growing demand, and it's a real opportunity for Michigan that isn't present in every state because the conditions aren't present to grow crops like that in every state.
Yeah. And I think it's one thing, it seems like Michigan really is uniquely positioned for some of these crops to grow just because of what we have here and the climate and the soil and how our farmers take such good care of the environment to make sure that can keep replicating season after season.
Absolutely. And Carl can speak to this too as a farmer himself, but there's an entrepreneurial spirit here in Michigan as well. Mm-hmm. The diversity of production, we would argue, has led to farmers and their rural business advisors being able to get out there, take some chances, be forward thinkers, and try to think about where's the market headed, how can we meet that in Michigan, leveraging the unique characteristics of our state, not least of which, of course, access to fresh water.
Yeah. What would each of you say, we talked a little bit, I made the comment early on that agriculture sometimes flies under the radar. What is one thing that you would really think that people would be surprised to know about agriculture? And Carl, we'll start with you.
Boy, interesting. Farmers are very unique businessmen. I mean, you take a look at what they do. They borrow all the money they need to put a crop in the ground, and they hope for the proper weather, no disasters, and hope for a good yield. And then on top of that, hopefully there's a market that can pay a reasonable price so that they can make a profit. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a huge risk, especially with the outlay of cost nowadays. I mean, there's a lot of risk in agriculture I think a lot of people do not really recognize. And there's a lot of times some of those crops do not pay. And but the farmer just keeps on going. They keep managing it. And the other years they do well on. But it's a tremendous risk that you have to manage because you don't know what your income's going to be till maybe 8 months down the road. That is a very interesting thing, and the farmers too don't like to brag very much. So that's why we have trouble with farmers telling what's your problem, what can we do to help you, because they're very personal. They want to take care of their community. And they aren't always out there blowing their horn like perhaps maybe they should. So maybe not direct answering your question, but I think I probably did a pretty good job just giving the perspective from a farmer.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely answered the question. I think you're exactly right that people don't understand, probably would be surprised at the amount of risk that a farmer takes every time they want to plant a crop, and just the entrepreneurial spirit. And I mean, I think all of us know, the farm community, they're the heart and soul of so many of our local communities across this state.
Well, and I think I agree with everything Carl said, but I would also add, I wish and hope that every Michigander could see inside the cab of a modern piece of farm equipment today, or go visit a local ag retail location and see some of the reports and imagery that they're able to generate for their farmer customers using satellite imagery, drone technology, and then employing all of the things we can figure out about a farm field in the equipment itself. When I got into this 20 years ago, and I didn't grow up on a farm. I'm doing this because I think it's highly interesting work, and it's innovative, and it's making a difference. But one of the first things that struck me as a new person in agriculture 20 years ago was precision agriculture, right? The idea of we have GPS-guided equipment and things of that nature. And again, that was 2 decades ago. Today, the things we're able to figure out about a farm field and track and map and subsequently understand how we can be more productive on the same amounts of land, right? Using the same or fewer inputs and amounts of water and different things makes a real difference. And I think for anybody coming in cold to agriculture is not just surprising but shocking. And it's a great success story for the industry that we can always do more to tell that story.
Oh, absolutely. I think whenever any industry, and ag is certainly a prime example, when you can use real science and data and technology to become more efficient, cost effective, you produce a better product at a price that everyone can afford.
Absolutely.
So,
I just comment on that. You hit on something that is really maybe unheard of or people don't recognize. But yeah, the technology, how we're applying nutrients to soil, how we're mapping the soil within inches basically, and knowing what to put on, where to put on, and how much to put on. But when I'm done with this phone call, I'm going to get on my app because I know the boys are harvesting corn right now, and I'm going to look at that combine. I'm going to see where it is. I'm going to see all the settings on that combine. I'm going to see what it's yielding, and if it don't look right, I can change the settings of them combine from right here in Lansing, sitting at my office.
Yeah, just tremendous.
Incredibly cool.
Yeah, it is, and I think you're exactly right, though. You both have made mention of it. That's what attracts young people, when you can have that type of impact and you can use technology and things that are interesting and really drive it. Now, all of us are in kind of the advocacy business. Part of our jobs are always to communicate ideas. As we kind of finish up here, can you give me what you'll both be focusing on when the legislature comes back? What are you going to be sharing with the legislature? Do you have one or two priority issues, or what are you going to be talking to them about? And Chuck, we'll start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So when this legislature came in, one of our top messages is that Michigan, by and large, is a pro-agriculture state that allows our industry to be successful. We have, generally speaking, a good relationship with our regulators at the Michigan Department of Agriculture, longstanding good relationship, and we have the tools we need to succeed. Let's keep a good thing going, and let's also be very cautious about potentially putting new roadblocks in place for growth in our industry. As we mentioned, the second largest job creator in our state and exports products to 6 continents. That's a success story. We can continue to grow, but we also, again, have to be very careful about standing in the way of that progress. I would just say a couple other things on the advocacy front. One is, what we've seen this year is a legislature where you have a lot of folks that are interested in learning about agriculture, even if they don't come out of the ag industry. One person who's really led a great process of learning has been our House Ag Chair, Reggie Miller, who's held different hearings just to ask questions, just to learn about different segments, which we appreciate. I would just say that one other thing that I can't help but saying as we look to 2024 on the advocacy front, we're going to lose 2 really important voices for agriculture in Congress, unfortunately, with the retirement of Senator Debbie Stabenow, who, of course, chairs the Senate Ag Committee. But, of course, we're recording this here in late November, and it's worth mentioning that here just today, we learned that Congressman Dan Kildee announced he won't be seeking re-election. This is somebody who's been an incredibly strong voice for mid-Michigan agriculture, for specialty crops, dry beans. So, that's sort of the one downside that I think we do need to call out here on the podcast. We are going to lose a couple voices at the federal level. But no, those are some of the main things we're focused on at the state level here, Jim. But
it is nice that you're talking about Representative Miller, and hopefully other ones are taking it, because when people leave, we have to make sure we replenish our own stock, and we have to keep electing people who have an interest in the industry and are willing to be committed and be champions for Michigan in Congress, and making sure that we have the resources we need.
And Jim, you don't have to come out of agriculture. We tell all of our legislators, you don't have to come out of the industry to be willing to listen, to come to the table, to learn. All we ask is that folks are open and willing to learn about what our challenges are that we face out there.
Yep. Carl, what are you going to be sharing with legislators and regulators and policymakers when they come back?
Well, a lot of that is just what Chuck had mentioned. Yes, he's absolutely right. When we take a look at who our legislators are, you got to remember they're elected, they're put into position. We need to work with those individuals, educate them on the issues that we're facing, and try to do the best in making progress in some of those issues. They're no different than you or I. Everyone wants to learn. Everyone wants to do the right thing. It's our job to make sure we give them the information and background and help them make good decisions. But also some of the things that we're looking at here, we're still going to be watching what happens with the energy. I know there was some preemption bills that was passed with that, and see if the governor signs them. I assume she is, but I'm not. You know what happens when you start assuming. So I got to take that.
Especially in this town.
But then we also look at the infrastructure. That's still one of our priorities to make sure we get that infrastructure needed, especially in our rural communities. And one that has been here forever, especially this time of year, deer issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've been throwing money at this deer issue for years and years and years. And I don't know, we must be doing a really good job in promoting the deer population because it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But we're seeing more impact to not only farmers, but other areas outside of farming, and the growth of that deer herd that's just not starting, but it's getting too big, and the issues that it's creating with some of the disease issues.
Yeah, just kind of a side note on that. I live in a city environment, but I have a big backyard that kind of buttresses up to a big open field and some wetlands. I routinely have 13 to 15 deer in my yard. And the population is huge.
They're everywhere.
Well, Jim, I live up in the Thumb area, mm-hmm. and I remember as a kid, we would stop the car if we seen a deer and say, "Hey, look at the deer."
Absolutely.
Now you're catching them in your grill.
It cracks me up because sometimes they'll even be around my driveway and they kind of look at me like, "What are you doing? We're just standing here outside." What?
Yeah, this is our house now, Jim.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, come on, get your car in the garage and get in there. But, well, as it always happens, time is flying, just flies by. But a very special thanks to Carl and Chuck, and to all of you for listening. Our state's food and agriculture industry is such an important part of our heritage and our future. But please tune in to our next episode and subscribe or like our podcast for easy notifications. But until then, next time, make sure you're out and about. Thank a farmer for all they're doing to strengthen Michigan's economy and putting food on our table.